Hello, my name is Egon Cholakian. I recently came into possession of a document in which the director of the Geophysical Service of the Russian Academy of Sciences attempted to argue that natural disasters pose no threat to anyone. With this document, he also sought to discredit the scientific validity of the information presented by ALLATRA. Yet in the end, all he managed to demonstrate was his own incompetence and unscientific approach. Today I will present this to you and reveal what is contained in this classified document, a document closed to the public, yet open for use in passing judgment on Russian citizens. It is essential to understand that such documents are created to discredit those who speak the truth. In reality, however, their primary purpose is to conceal from both the public and the global community the escalating threat of geodynamic catastrophes. Chief among them is the potential eruption of the Siberian magma plume. Before I proceed to the document I just mentioned, allow me to first remind you what this entails. According to research conducted by the international scientific team of ALLATRA, there is evidence of intensified activity of a mantle plume located in the Siberian region of Russia, an existential threat to humanity. A mantle plume is an immense column of superheated magma rising from the Earth's interior towards the crust. The Siberian magma plume is now ascending rapidly in the very region where, just 250 million years ago, the Siberian traps erupted, an event that triggered the most massive extinction in Earth's history, the Great Permian extinction of the species. According to preliminary estimates, the area of magma flow beneath Siberia may currently span a diameter of 2,500 to 3,000 kilometers. That's approximately 1,550 to 1,860 miles, which is comparable in size to the entire continent of Australia. At this stage, the magma plume beneath Siberia has already entered a dangerous phase. It has begun to uplift the entire tectonic plate. This is evident from peripheral effects. Seismic activity has started to intensify along the plate's edges. This indicates that the magma plume could breach the surface at any moment. The scale of this potential threat extends far beyond the borders of Russia. It is a challenge of planetary magnitude. For comparison, an eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano could devastate the entire North American continent. However, a potential breach of the Siberian plume would exceed the force of a Yellowstone eruption by a factor of 1,000. Scientists at ALLATRA have proposed a technologically advanced solution to prevent global catastrophe through planned degassing of the plume. This methodology involves the controlled release of pressure within the magma plume by systematically venting gases and lava. Such an approach would require international cooperation and a large-scale technological mobilization. The scientific report on the threat of a magma plume eruption in Siberia and strategies for addressing the issue provides more information about the threat posed by the Siberian magma plume and its global consequences. I have repeatedly emphasized that an analysis of the facts indicates the following. Certain circles within the Russian leadership are fully aware of the activation of the Siberian plume, but are deliberately concealing this information from both the global community and their very own citizenry. Perhaps for those who are not yet familiar with the details, a reasonable question arises. If degassing is a viable method of eliminating the threat, then why are the Russian authorities refusing to implement it? The answer, regrettably, is all too mundane: personal gain. The degassing process would necessitate the evacuation of millions of people from high-risk zones. effectively halting the stream of personal income that flows daily from these territories. For the authorities, this represents a direct financial blow. The catastrophe has not yet occurred, yet their financial losses would begin immediately. Would they willingly accept such a loss? Of course not. They will not alert the population of the threat. They will instead continue to propagate disinformation until the very end. Their self-interest outweighs everything else. It outweighs the very well-being of their own people, the inhabitants of the planet, and the future of humanity itself. So Russia's shadow power structure operates according to a clear directive. The public must not know the truth. They are terrified that the actual situation in Siberia will become known. This is why any attempt by scientists or organizations to disclose it is met with severe suppression. A striking example of this is the repression directed at the ALLATRA movement. As I mentioned earlier on, in 2014, ALLATRA volunteers discreetly delivered data on the activation of the Siberian plume to the appropriate Russian authorities. Shortly thereafter, the FSB launched a campaign to discredit the movement and its scientific findings, initially within Russia and later through their agents of influence in Ukraine and Europe. Beginning in 2021, when statements about a possible plume eruption became public, the pressure intensified. And in 2023, ALLATRA was officially declared an undesirable organization in Russia. What followed were raids, fabricated cases, and arrest, all of which forced many ALLATRA participants to flee the country. According to testimonies from volunteers who escaped, during interrogations, the FSB explicitly stated that ALLATRA participants should not have spoken about climate issues. And what is the result? I am aware that in Russia today, 50 criminal cases and 45 administrative cases have already been initiated against former ALLATRA participants. Likewise, 7 individuals remain in custody as of this day as well. And new cases continue to be initiated against former ALLATRA participants in Russia. In these cases, it has already been officially documented that the grounds for prosecution were predicated upon dissemination of information about natural disasters, even before the organization was designated undesirable in Russia. Certain circles within the Russian power structure are attacking ALLATRA volunteers with such ferocity precisely because they were the first to openly speak about the threat posed by the Siberian plume, bringing the truth to the people. They fear that the real situation in Siberia will become public knowledge, and they are attempting to suppress the movement by any means necessary, even investing enormous resources into this effort. The tragedy is that they failed to grasp the most crucial point. That is, no amount of funding and no degree of persecution against ALLATRA volunteers will ever stop the magma from breaching through the Siberian plume or halt the unfolding natural cataclysms. What grieves me most, however, is the plight of ordinary Russians. People who are unable to protect themselves and their families simply because the truth about the looming catastrophe is being withheld from them. Right now, they live their lives in peace, go to work, raise their children, and they have absolutely no idea that should the Siberian magma plume erupt, which could happen at any moment, they will perish within the very first seconds or even minutes of the disaster. To conceal this information from the public is nothing short of inhumane. People must not be condemned to death because scoundrels have seized power in Russia. And in this case, I am referring to one particular scoundrel. And to your surprise, I suspect, it is not Mr. Putin. I am speaking of the man who stands behind him, the one who manipulates Russia from the shadows and has established his own power structure parallel to Putin's. And now I turn to the underlying core of my address. Alarming information has reached me. In Russian courts, a review authored by a certain Mr. Yuri Vinogradov, director of the Federal Research Center, Unified Geophysical Service of the Russian Academy of Sciences, is currently being used as evidence against former ALLATRA volunteers. I have the text of this very review right in front of me. It concerns the international online forum, Global Crisis, The Responsibility, which was held on December 2nd, 2023, and was organized by both the participants of the Creative Society Project in collaboration with ALLATRA volunteers. The forum had but one objective: to draw global attention to the accelerating frequency and intensity of natural disasters. At this event, we presented the results of nearly 30 years of interdisciplinary independent research on natural catastrophes. We proposed potential strategies for navigating the global crisis. In fact, yours truly was among the speakers. And at that forum, I warned about the anomalous warming of Siberia and the existential threat it poses to humanity. Now let us turn to my dear friend Mr. Vinogradov's so-called review of this forum. This document is being presented as an expert opinion on the reliability of the information shared during the Global Crisis the Responsibility Forum, specifically the sections addressing earthquakes and volcanic activity. However, its true purpose is transparent: to undermine trust in the scientific data and decades-long research of ALLATRA. His intent is to portray our movement as lacking any scientific foundation so that all information provided by our volunteers, including data on the Siberian magma plume, would be dismissed as unworthy of attention. This is not a random attack. It is part of a deliberate campaign to silence the truth. I have the text of this so-called review in my possession, and I deliberately placed the word review in quotation marks. Why, you may ask? Well, the content of this review itself is simply astonishing. It is absurd, unscientific, and riddled with Mr. Vinogradov's personal subjective judgments, entirely unsupported by fact. Upon learning this individual is considered a scientist, I was simply stunned. Such incompetence provoked deep outrage within the international scientific community of ALLATRA. We could not let it go unanswered, and we have since prepared a thorough point-by-point rebuttal to every allegation made by my dear friend Mr. Vinogradov. Today I will present our response. So then, in his review, which was purported to demonstrate our lack of scientific credibility, Mr. Vinogradov succeeded only in revealing his own unprofessionalism as a scientist and a complete absence of critical thinking as an individual. Let us now examine this step by step. Point 1. In his so-called review, my dear friend Mr. Vinogradov states the following. The claim regarding an 8-fold increase in the number of earthquakes over the past decade is incorrect, as this rise is primarily due to the expansion of observation networks and the increased detection of minor earthquakes. The most comprehensive data on significant earthquakes have been recorded in the United States Geological Survey, USGS catalog, since 1973, when a sufficiently uniform global network of seismic stations was established, enabling objective year-by-year comparisons of seismic activity. Figure 1 further presents data on global earthquake occurrences with a magnitude greater than 5 from 1973 to 2010. The figure illustrates that according to USGS data, there is indeed an increase in seismic activity. However, This increase is not by orders of magnitude as claimed by the report's authors. Therefore, they deliberately distort the data by presenting inaccurate information. Now, the answer to this is the following. The reviewer's assertion regarding the distortion of the graph is unclear, as all the conditions they outlined were adhered to in the form's analysis. Specifically, the graph of significant earthquakes presented at the forum is quite literally based on data from the USGS catalog. The comparison uses data starting from 1979, a point when all earthquakes with a magnitude above 5 were reliably recorded worldwide. The graph itself includes data from as early as 1930, but until 1990, seismic activity remained stable, ranging from 0 to 3 events per year. Therefore, the choice of 1973 as the starting point for comparison, which the reviewer cites as the beginning of comprehensive earthquake recording for magnitudes of 5 and above, is quite literally valid. It is crucial to understand that the graph presented in the form specifically depicts the number of significant earthquakes with magnitudes of 6 and above, meaning these are even stronger earthquakes than those referenced by the reviewer and were definitively recorded by sensors. Additionally, I believe it is important to note that when downloading data, the significance parameter must be set to a minimum value of 1,000. This threshold was established not by the forum's authors, but by the USGS seismologist. The constructed graph is entirely accurate, meets the reviewer's stated criteria, and does not contradict their observations. The discrepancy arises because the reviewer used different search parameters in the USGS database, leading to predictably different results. Therefore, comparing these data sets is entirely inappropriate. The reviewer's graph does not invalidate the forum's graph in terms of data collection methodology or the identified 8-fold increase in the number of significant perceptible, as the reviewer describes them, earthquakes worldwide. Furthermore, the increase in the number of seismic sensors has no relevance to the graph under discussion. It is also entirely unclear why Mr. Vinogradov, in attempting to refute the increase in global seismic activity, particularly in recent years, relies on outdated data that only extends to 2010, which is quite literally 14 years old. The primary increase in earthquake frequency began around 2006, as can be seen in the graph presented by the reviewer. However, the further development of this trend is missing. The reviewer deliberately omits this data, evidently distorting the information. Moreover, the forum presents graphs constructed using data from various seismic monitoring agencies. Analyzing the number and uniqueness of seismic events across different international databases makes it clear that the United States Geological Survey is not a comprehensive global source of seismic data. The USGS itself officially guarantees the accuracy of earthquake information only pertaining to the United States, not worldwide. Since 2014, the USGS database has lacked records for many earthquakes of various magnitudes that are present in other seismic databases. The most comprehensive database is maintained by the International Seismological Center, which collects data globally from local geophysical agencies and monitoring systems in various countries. If my dear friend Mr. Vinogradov, director of the Geophysical Center of the Russian Academy of Sciences, references only the USGS database, it suggests a deliberate effort to conceal information. It also raises a number of reasonable questions as to why Vinogradov places reliance on the USGS catalog when in fact the Russian scientific community prioritizes uses of data from the International Seismological Center instead. I find this particularly challenging to accept, given that he is a distinguished member of the Scientific Council of the Geophysical Center of the Russian Academy of Sciences, which would cause me to further believe that he should know better. Regardless, the International Seismological Center Earthquake Database aggregates information from more than 130 agencies worldwide, making its data set significantly larger than that of the USGS. If the International Seismological Center database is analyzed using earthquake magnitudes of 5.0 and above, selecting the maximum magnitude estimate among all reported values for each event, the resulting graph is as follows. Given the graph presented by Vinogradov's analysis, it is evident that he deliberately distorts the data by providing incomplete information, likely out of concern for public panic. Vinogradov's next statement. The claims regarding newly discovered underwater volcanoes are also unfounded, and the information linking their formation in recent years to deep-sea earthquakes is inaccurate. These volcanoes have existed for thousands of years. They were simply discovered only recently due to more detailed studies of the ocean floor and the advent of deep-sea imaging technologies, such as radar systems, which allow for more precise seabed surveys. For example, the Haakon Mosby volcano in the Barents Sea was discovered only in 1989. However, detailed studies have shown that it formed approximately 18,000 years ago and has undergone at least 2 periods of activation during this time. To this, my response is quite simple. Vinogradov, director of the Geophysical Center of the Russian Academy of Sciences, asserts that the claims regarding new underwater volcanoes are also unfounded, and the information about their formation in recent years and their connection to deep-sea earthquakes is inaccurate. And he is also unaware of well-documented cases of new underwater volcano formation following periods of high seismic activity. Then once again, his competence comes into serious question. For example, in 2018, a new volcano was born off the coast of Mayotte, near Reunion Island in the Madagascar region. As the volcano grew, scientists recorded 7,000 volcano tectonic earthquakes and 407 very long-period seismic signals. Over the course of a year, magma traveled 80 kilometers from the mantle to the Earth's surface, passing through the entire crust and ultimately forming a new underwater volcano. The speed of this formation was unprecedented. By 2019, this was the largest recorded active submarine eruption to date. In its short lifespan, the volcano had already ejected over 5 cubic kilometers of lava, the most significant volume ever observed, dramatically reshaping the underwater landscape. These findings are based on the study which you will then see on the screen. Let me give you another example. In 2015, a swarm of earthquakes occurred in the area of Deception volcano, triggered by a deep, prolonged, and large-scale magma intrusion. At the time, this was the most significant activity ever recorded in the region. Additionally, near Deception volcano, from August 2020 to February 2021, approximately 85,000 earthquakes occurred in the vicinity of the previously inactive Orca underwater volcano caused by magma intrusion. Over 6 months, magma burned through 10 kilometers of Earth's crust, setting a record for the speed and intensity of intrusion. The forum addressed not only the formation of new volcanoes, but also the activation of pre-existing underwater volcanoes in connection with geodynamic activity in the Earth's interior. However, these are not the only cases indicating anomalous volcano activity in recent decades. For example, axial seamount the most closely monitored underwater volcano in the world, provides an exceptional window into the dynamic interactions between magma storage, transport, and eruption processes at a mid-ocean ridge. According to a peer-reviewed study published in Geophysical Research Letters, an eruption in April 2015 produced the largest volume of erupted lava since monitoring and mapping began in the mid-1980s after the shortest repose time due to a recent increase in magma supply. The higher rate of magma replenishment since 2011 resulted in the eruption of the most mafic lava in the last 500 to 600 years. The 2015 eruption was the largest and the first on the North Rip Zone since at least the mid-1980s, and the most mafic since 1450. A change in lava composition followed an increase in the magma supply rate and a decreased repose interval. The authors of the study emphasized that although the volcano has been monitored since the 1980s and has erupted multiple times during that period, this does not preclude the conclusion that activation of this scale is occurring for the first time in 500 to 600 years. They further conclude, thus the composition of 2015 lava flows represents a fundamental change at the volcano, which we interpret reflects the arrival of new magma into the summit reservoir. Axial seamount may be moving into a period of larger and more frequent eruptions of hotter, more mafic lavas. These studies have been published in leading international journals, which confirms the high level of research conducted and the reliability of the findings. Moreover, this is only a small fraction of the publications from recent years. It is also worth noting that Vinogradov is not a specialist in volcanology and therefore lacks the necessary expertise to assess the credibility of these studies. Judging by the content of his review, he appears unfamiliar with the aforementioned articles from peer-reviewed scientific journals. On what basis, then, does he conclude that the information is unreliable? Is his judgment based on knowledge of just a single underwater volcano? Mr. Vinogradov further states, the claims regarding an awakened Mars are inaccurate. The study of Mars quakes only began in late 2018. On November 26, 2018, the InSight spacecraft deployed a seismometer called SEIS, Seismic Experiment for Interior Structure, to detect Martian seismic activity and analyze the planet's internal structure. This seismometer is sensitive enough to record meteorite impacts. The first weak seismic signal, likely indicating a minor event, was detected and recorded by SEIS on April 6, 2019. SEIS also registered surface vibrations alongside 3 other distinct types of sound signals. Additional seismic events were recorded on March 14th, April 10th, and April 11th, but their origins were ambiguous, making it difficult to determine their actual exact causes. Since its activation, SEIS has recorded over 100 events, of which only 21 were considered potential Marsquakes. Between the instrument's deployment and September 30th, 2019, a total of 174 Martian seismic events were detected, with 24 of them measuring below magnitude 3 on the Richter scale. The 2 strongest events had epicenters near the Cerberus Fossae fault system. By December 2019, SEIS had recorded 322 Martian seismic events. Between June 2020 and the fall of that year, no Marsquakes were detected. However, from September 2020 onward, SEIS recorded 5 seismic events, and over the course of a single Martian year, more than 480 seismic events were detected. None of these exceeded magnitude 3.7. On March 7th, and March 18, 2021, SAIS recorded 2 events with magnitudes of 3.3 and 3.1 respectively. 2 stronger quakes with magnitudes of 3.5 and 3.6 occurred on August 25, 2021. A low-frequency Mars quake of magnitude 4.2 struck the Valles Marineris region on the same day. The longest recorded Mars quake lasting 94 minutes was detected on September 18, 2021. On May 4, 2022, SAIS registered the strongest Mars quake in 3 years of observation, with a magnitude of 5. As these data show, seismic activity is a regular phenomenon on Mars. However, given the short observation period and the use of only a single station, it is premature to draw conclusions about the planet's overall seismicity, let alone claim any rapid increase in such events. We now respond to this with the following. The historical record of Mars seismic activity presented by Mr. Vinogradov neither proves nor disapproves its recent activation. The absence of previous earthquake observations on Mars does not necessarily mean that seismic activity has not increased in recent years. In fact, even the events listed in his review clearly indicate a gradual increase in the magnitude of Mars quakes over time. Moreover, other endogenous processes on Mars have been observed to intensify in recent decades. Consider the changes related to the planet's fragmented magnetic field. In 2004, the first recorded Martian aurora was observed in the southern hemisphere. Between 2014 and 2021, an additional 278 discrete auroral events were detected. By 2022, auroras were observed covering nearly half of Mars. This nearly 20-year observational period has revealed a significant increase in auroral anomalies, indicating changes in the planet's interior. Given that Mars' core ceased generating a global magnetic field at the time of the planet's catastrophic transformation, these recent observations suggest ongoing geodynamic activity within its very interior. Now, let's examine Mars' magmatic activity. In 2018, liquid water was discovered beneath the ice cap at the planet's south pole. According to specialized studies, no amount of salt alone can cause basal ice melting at the Martian South Pole under typical conditions. Only a subsurface magma plume could generate sufficient heat for localized temporary melting of the basal polar ice. Another study confirms that the recent basal melting of Martian ice deposits at the South Pole could be driven by locally elevated geothermal heat. The fact that geothermal heat and magmatic activity persist on Mars, long considered a geologically dead planet for the past 3 to 4 billion years, suggests an emergence of additional energy source within its interior. According to specialized studies on Mars seismic activity, many of the seismic events cited by Vinogradov are directly linked to the rise of magma plume within the planet's interior. For example, between 2019 and 2020, 47 Mars quakes were recorded, with over 90% of them concentrated in 2 regions beneath Cerberus Forcae. These events occurred at all times of the Martian day, ruling out tidal modulation, such as gravitational influences from Mars' moon Phobos, as their cause. The authors of the study attribute recently detected low-frequency repetitive seismic events to magma movement associated with volcanic activity in the upper mantle beneath Cerberus Forcae. Continuous seismic activity suggests that Cerberus Forcae is a highly active seismic zone and that the Martian mantle remains dynamic. Additionally, a 2022 study reported that while most of Mars' volcanic and tectonic activity occurred within the first 1.5 billion years of its geological history, Recent volcanism, tectonic shifts, and ongoing seismicity in the Elysium Planitia indicate continued activity. However, for the study's authors, this recent surge in volcanic and tectonic processes is unexpected on a cooling Mars. The study presents observational data and geophysical models demonstrating that Elysium Planitia sits atop an active mantle plume with an estimated diameter of 4,000 kilometers. The inferred characteristics of this plume are comparable to Earth's mantle plumes, which are associated with the formation of large igneous provinces. These findings confirm that Mars' interior remains geodynamically active today. Another discovery presented at the Europlanet Science Congress in 2024 revealed the presence of a massive magma plume beneath the Tharsis volcanic region, home to Olympus Mons, the tallest volcano in the solar system. This plume is located approximately 1,100 kilometers beneath the surface. Dr. Bart Root from Delft University of Technology led the research team, which utilized data from multiple missions, including NASA's InSight, to develop a new gravitational map of Mars. This map showed that the Olympus Mons region is rising rather than subsiding, contrary to previous expectations. In other words, magma within the magma chamber beneath Olympus Mons is actively ascending. However, in Vinogradov's assertion that claims of an awakened Mars are inaccurate, he either overlooked or deliberately omitted the increasing magmatic activity, an issue explicitly addressed in the forum segment he critiques. The key question raised at the Global Crisis, the Responsibility Forum, remains: why have Martian magma plumes not cooled and crystallized over 3 to 4 billion years on a planet with no mantle activity and no internal heat sources? Why are they instead actively rising in the present era, accompanied by seismic activity? It is precisely these processes that were described in the forum as evidence of an awakened Mars. Also in his fictitious review, my good friend Mr. Vinogradov states, the report claims that Earth has experienced anomalous gravitational spikes, abrupt changes in shape, and a sudden acceleration in rotation. However, these assertions are simply inaccurate. Earth is not a perfect sphere, nor is it a completely rigid body. It is influenced by gravitational forces from the Moon, the Sun, and other massive planets, such as Jupiter. As a result, Earth's rotational speed can fluctuate. However, scientists have determined that these variations occur on the scale of milliseconds per day. Most scientists agree that the phenomenon known as Chandler wobble, the oscillation of Earth's rotational axis, causes the axis to shift by several meters in opposite directions over time. Simultaneously, the planet itself undergoes lateral oscillations. This cycle occurs approximately every 7 years. We replied to this as follows. Yuri Vinogradov's claim that reports of anomalous gravitational spikes, abrupt changes in Earth's shape, and sudden acceleration in planetary rotation are inaccurate is glaring demonstration of his lack of competence in this area. His statement dismisses the research and findings of leading global laboratories and institutions, most likely because he is simply unaware of these studies. Let us examine the key facts. In 1995, a disruption in Earth's rotation was recorded. The direction of the planet's rotational axis changed, and its drift velocity increased 17-fold. According to specialized studies, the turning point of polar drift was established in October 1995. Additionally, until 1995, scientists noted a slowdown in the planet's rotation. While sharp increases in the acceleration of the Earth's rotation occurred in 1995 and 2016, which have no historical analogs, According to data from the Earth Orientation Center of the Paris Observatory, the duration of the day began to decrease by several milliseconds in 1995 and 2016, indicating that the Earth was rotating faster than usual. In 1997 through 1998, 4 different scientific teams independently recorded anomalous changes in various geophysical parameters of the Earth. Based on satellite data, a team of authors from Moscow State University and the Institute of Earth Physics of the Russian Academy of Sciences identified a jump in Earth's center of mass in 1998. During the same period, the International Earth Rotation Service, IERS, recorded a sharp acceleration in the planet's rotation. At that time, scientists at the Medicina station in Italy recorded a jump in gravitational force. Simultaneously, a sharp change in the shape of the Earth was observed, measured using the U.S. Satellite Laser Ranging System. The planet began to expand anomalously in the equatorial region, whereas the previous trend had been the opposite. According to Professor Barkin, Doctor of Physical and Mathematical Sciences, Professor Smolkoff, Doctor of Technical Sciences, Professor Aruzhanov, Doctor of Geographical Sciences, Distinguished Professor Han, Academician of Russian Academy of Sciences, Doctor of Geological and Mineralogical Sciences, along with many other scientists, these anomalies play a significant role in subsequent changes across all layers of the Earth. Thus, the question of Mr. Vinogradov's competencies and expertise in the field of earth sciences arises once again. The next passage, written by Vinogradov, only emphasizes the previous thesis about his competence. The report pays significant attention to the issue of deep focus earthquakes, which the authors refer to as cavitation explosions, linking them to the collision of hot and cold magma rivers, which is unreliable information. The authors intentionally manipulate data by discussing deep focus earthquakes, events originating at depths greater than 300 kilometers, while citing examples from Turkey and the Mariana Trench, depths up to 30 kilometers. Indeed, scientists have long sought to explain the causes of deep focus earthquakes. Currently, the most popular hypothesis suggests that the primary cause of deep focus earthquakes is the change in the aggregate state of the minerals composing the outer mantle. Under high pressures, minerals become unstable and transition into new modifications with a denser atomic packing. A so-called phase transition from olivine to spinel under high pressure, resulting in a significant reduction in the volume of the rock, which generates seismic waves. Once again, the question arises regarding the competence of the individual who made this statement, as he fails to verify depths of the events which using deep focus earthquake events in the Mariana Trench in Turkey as an argument. The subsequent assertion that the authors of the report intentionally manipulate data by discussing deep focus earthquake events originating in depths greater than 300 kilometers, while citing examples from Turkey and the Mariana Trench, depths of up to 30 kilometers, is in turn a deliberate manipulation of data and a falsehood. Deep focus earthquakes regularly occur in the Mariana Trench. Since 2000, approximately 1,200 deep focus events have been recorded in this region, even based on the incomplete USGS database, and it is these events that were discussed at the forum. In the region of the Anatolian Plate, approximately 190 earthquakes with a magnitude greater than 2.5 occurred at depths greater than 700 kilometers in 2021. These deep focus events are absent from the USGS database, but are present in the ISC database, which further demonstrates that reliance on the USGS database in such cases is wholly inappropriate, particularly from a professional perspective. Mr. Vinogradov's statement that currently there is a popular hypothesis that the main cause of deep focus earthquakes is the change in the aggregate state of minerals that make up the Earth's mantle does not refute that the hypothesis regarding the explosive nature of deep focus earthquakes is incorrect. The existence of one theory does not exclude the existence of another, and which theory is correct will only be determined by time. One can only speak of the validity or invalidity of any hypothesis after it has been proven or disproven. Neither of these has been provided by the reviewer. Therefore, by declaring the hypothesis to be invalid, he violates the very existing principles of knowledge and the methodology of science. However, it is worth noting that the theory of deep focus earthquakes forming as a result of changes in the aggregate state of minerals does not explain the exponential increase in the number of deep focus earthquakes, which is observed regardless of the number of sensors. It is also essential that in his response, Mr. Vinogradov deliberately deviated from the topic of the rapid increase in the earthquakes at depths greater than 300 kilometers. This fact is independent of the causes of deep focus earthquakes and is confirmed by all seismological services as well as being discussed in various scientific works. Such an increase clearly indicates the emergence of processes in the Earth's interior that have not been observed before. As for the hypothesis regarding the phase transition of olivine into spinel, allegedly involving the subduction of an oceanic plate, one must point out that no such subduction of an oceanic plate into the mantle is occurring. And this is for one straightforward reason only. Specifically, there is immense pressure within the mantle, which only intensifies with depth, thus preventing the plate from subduction. A fragile oceanic plate, according to the fundamental laws of physics, cannot descend into the mantle, let alone float within it. Even if it were to begin descending, it would be rapidly melted by the extreme temperatures found in the Earth's interior. Regrettably, the current state of geophysics is disheartening if even such basic principles remain beyond the grasp of our esteemed experts. Vinogradov then deliberately attempts to erode the character and accomplishment of an individual with whom I am personally acquainted by concealing his mathematical qualifications and identifying the gentleman as a marketing professional instead, wholly for the purpose of mischaracterizing his knowledge and expertise and consequently attempting to relegate his professional standing in the matter at hand. Please let me be explicit in my assertion. Vinogradov writes about one of our speakers at the Global Crisis, the Responsibility Forum, and I quote, "Analyst Lenis Jabari Najib Mohammed, who is the marketing director, and I'm adding to this, also a mathematician, has extended the linear graph of recurrence several years into the future to an exponential function. It is unclear on what basis, concluding that in 5 years, our lives will turn into hell. Such calculations are mathematically incorrect, unreliable, and catastrophically distort the data from earthquake observation statistics." I'm going to respond to that with the following. The statement above is itself incorrect, unreliable, and distorts the facts to portray the forum participants in a negative light. Let's just take a look at the following video.
I was really intrigued with two forums that I watched. What intrigued me most was the graphs and looking at the earthquakes and the geodynamics of the earthquakes that are happening all over the world. I was so alarmed and I was so devastated. I said, let me go into more of this because I want to prove that maybe something is wrong. Something has to be wrong because if this continue to increase, we are in trouble. And then I started plotting these earthquakes on a graph that I developed and seeing it, and also talking to some colleagues of mine, some of which are mechanical engineers, civil engineers, electrical engineers, and then went to some of my professors at Fresno State University and then talked to some of them about the troubles that I was having with the numbers. I was concerned with my own life, my life of my family, my life of my loved ones and friends, and trying to determine, okay, how would this make sense to me? So I went on into details as I was talking to my colleagues, and they was confirming with me exactly what the Creative Society was showing us. I was so devastated because numbers don't lie. Based on the numbers that we observed, and also when we went over through the graphs that we watched and saw, and as those numbers exponentially increase and go up, we're going to be seeing more catastrophes, more earthquakes, and it's going to be devastating.
Thus, from the speech, it is clear that Linus did not derive the exponential graph himself, but consulted and presented data with mathematics professors at Fresno State University in California, meaning he had the basis and competence to conduct this analysis. Furthermore, he extended not a linear graph of earthquake growth, but specifically an exponential one, as such trends are observed in the data, which can be seen even in the illustrations of this video. It should be noted that in the communique and the first report of the GeoChange Global Environment Changes, a threat to civilization development, which were created under the guidance of the academician of the USSR Academy of Sciences and the Russian Academy of Sciences, honorary professor of Lomonosov Moscow State University, honorary president of the World Organization for Scientific Cooperation, WASCO, UK, honorary president of the International Academy of Sciences, Austria, doctor of Geological and Mineralogical Sciences, Victor Efimovich Hein, and academician of the IAS, professor doctor of Geological and Mineralogical Sciences, vice president of the International Academy of Sciences, HE&E, Austria, president of the Global Earthquake Prediction Network, UK, general director of the Scientific Research Institute of Earthquake Studies, Baku, Azerbaijan, Elchin Halilov. A sharp increase in the number of natural disasters, including the increase in the number of earthquakes, is reflected, and an exponential rather than linear trend of growth in geodynamic disasters on Earth is forecasted. If Mr. Vinogradov had not neglected independent study of earthquake statistics in various databases, he would have arrived at the same conclusions as analyst Linus Jabari Najib Muhammad. Vinogradov continues to show his level of knowledge in the following paragraph. The disaster described by the authors of the report regarding a possible magma eruption in the Mariana Trench area is also greatly exaggerated and unreliable. On January 15, 2022, the eruption of the Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai volcano occurred in the country of Tonga, Polynesia, during which billions of cubic meters of water met billions of cubic meters of magma, as staged in the report. However, no global catastrophe took place. We now respond to this with the following. In this point, Yuri Vinogradov once again demonstrates his incompetence regarding volcanism, and the example he provided of the eruption on January 15, 2022 of the Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai volcano is not a process of tectonic rupture in the Mariana Trench, but rather serves as additional evidence supporting the hypothesis presented at the forum. It is worth noting that this eruption was recognized as the largest explosive eruption recorded since the eruption of Pinatubo in 1991. The energy released during the Hunga explosion was comparable only to the eruption of the Krakatoa VEI-6 in 1883. The Hunga eruption generated atmospheric and acoustic waves that spread around the entire globe several times and created significant disturbances in the ionosphere. The massive cloud of ash and gas produced by the eruption reached 58 kilometers at its highest point. Breaking through the mesosphere, the eruption also produced the highest number of lightning strikes recorded for any type of natural phenomenon. The lava that caused such a powerful eruption, when coming into contact with the thin layer of water above the vent of the underwater volcano, had a different composition than during previous eruptions in Tonga in 2009 and 2014. In previous eruptions, the magma was trapped in an intermediate focus, whereas this time the magma rose very quickly without undergoing chemical changes. According to lead author Alexa von Eaton from the U.S. Geological Survey, researchers are aware of the theoretical limits of how quickly and high a cloud of ash and gas can rise during a volcanic eruption. However, the results show that the eruption of Hunga Tonga exceeded all possible theoretical limits. During this eruption, there was indeed a meeting of molten magma and water. However, the volumes of this eruption are vastly different from the potential rupture of the Mariana Trench discussed in the forum. The caldera of the Hunga volcano had a diameter of only about 5 kilometers and was located at a depth of only about 150 meters underwater. Nevertheless, the explosion was so powerful that it easily broke through the water and ejected a plume of volcanic ash reaching 58 kilometers in height. The diameter of the caldera at 5 kilometers is not comparable to the surface of the potential rupture of the Mariana Trench, which, according to widely known data, is 2,540 kilometers long and has an average width of 69 kilometers. Furthermore, the 150-meter column of water above the Hunga Tonga Hunga Hayapai volcano is not comparable to the water column in the Mariana Trench, where the maximum depth reaches 10,994 meters. Why is an explosion of magma at the bottom of the Mariana Trench predicted despite the enormous pressure of the water column there? First, the magma rising from the depths is much hotter and has a different chemical composition than that which is typically erupted during underwater eruptions. The 2022 Hunga eruption is an example of this, where the lava had atypical composition and higher temperature. Second, the explosion from the contact of water and lava in the Mariana Trench will occur because this zone is squeezed within a gorge of Mariana Trench. On both sides, magma and the water column are under colossal pressure. Therefore, an explosion in a confined space will be exponentially more powerful than under normal conditions. In this particular case, comparing this explosion to that of an underwater volcano is like comparing a billion cubic meters of magma to a teaspoon of lava. The difference is rather significant. This deliberate manipulation by Vinogradov indicates his ignorance and actions by order from above. In the end, Vinogradov draws his conclusion, and I quote, "Based on the above, I believe that in the video material Global Crisis Responsibility International Online Forum of December 2nd, 2023, published on the electronic website of the Internet network ALLATRA TV International, Internet Television, a large amount of reliable geophysical, geodynamic, analytical information regarding earthquakes and volcanic activity is presented. However, their analysis and forecasting methods are mathematically unsubstantiated, unreliable, and contradict recognized scientific theories. They are presented by unqualified specialists in the field being studied and do not utilize, and with a high degree of probability intentionally ignore, modern scientific interpretations, methods, and approaches." To this, I will introduce our own conclusion. The examples provided by the reviewer, Mr. Vinogradov, did not demonstrate the unreliability of the analysis and methods, as the materials of the forum are based on conclusions drawn from peer-reviewed articles. The authors of the forum present their scientific hypotheses which in no way contradict modern understandings of the development of science, serve as a means of knowledge acquisition, and do not violate the laws of any country in the world. This is an inherent right to freedom of speech. All modern practices regarding data processing presented in the forum's analysis have been adhered to. The review presented by Yuri Vinogradov in turn contained no references to scientific sources and also demonstrated the reviewer's incompetence and lack of knowledge of scientific facts necessary for writing such reviews. On what basis, then, was the conclusion drawn that the theories presented at the forum are in fact unreliable? Mr. Vinogradov intentionally ignored a significant portion of the scientific material presented at the forum. Vinogradov states, "The individuals acting as experts in this online forum are incompetent, including a tax law specialist, marketing director, journalist, martial arts master, entrepreneur, expert in the development and commercialization of new technologies in the fields of energy, chemical processes, and natural sciences, a specialist in the analytical department studying the Earth for the Creative Society project, systems analyst, independent researcher on climate change issues, candidate of pedagogical sciences, etc., and provide viewers and listeners with deliberately distorted information that fosters negative feelings of fear and danger for their lives." I'll now counter with the following. The individuals acting as speakers at the forum are not analysts who have processed scientific material and prepared the theoretical foundation and scientific justifications as stated in the forum. Quote, "We are here to share with you the facts that specialists from various fields and independent analysts of the Creative Society project have gathered and analyzed on a volunteer basis over several decades. Behind every fact you will hear today are serious scientific studies, years of observation, and thorough analysis. The results demonstrated at this and previous forums were prepared by a group of specialists from various scientific fields who wish to remain anonymous. Consequently, all presentations were delivered by volunteers with different professional specializations. Judging by his competencies regarding the issues addressed in the review, Yuri Vinogradov could also easily participate in this volunteer activity alongside other concerned individuals. Furthermore, it should be noted that the material discussed is presented in the format of an online video conference, which employs a journalistic approach to information delivery to make it more understandable to a wide audience. The comprehensive analysis presented at the forum cannot be conducted by a single researcher alone. Only through the collaboration of specialists from various fields of science can the model be developed that takes into account the modern changes in all layers of the Earth. The depth of the work presented can only be assessed by thoroughly immersing oneself in the material from dozens of scientific disciplines and studies, as superficial acquaintance will lead to out-of-context fragments of the complete picture, hasty conclusions, and unqualified reviews, such as the one presented by Yuri Vinogradov. The reviewer claims that distorted information is presented at the forum, but provides no examples of such distortion. The examples given instead only demonstrate that Mr. Vinogradov did not fully comprehend the material at hand. The assertion that the information presented at the forum contributes to fostering fear and danger for one's life is a personal perception of the reviewer and is not objective. It should be noted that recent statements from representatives of the United Nations and the scientific community regarding the alarming climate situation are often even more severe than those presented at the forum. For example, if we do not take action now, this century could be the last for humanity. Antonio Guterres at the TED Talk 2020. If we do not act, we face the collapse of civilization. Renowned naturalist and broadcaster Sir David Attenborough at the UN Climate Change Conference, COP24, 2018. The world must wake up. We are on the edge of a precipice and moving in the wrong direction. Antonio Guterres at the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly in 2021, and many others. The forum repeatedly emphasizes that the information is provided to inform the public, not to incite fear. Furthermore, concern for one's life and the lives of future generations is a normal reaction for a person who values their life when faced with the reality of the planet's situation. Vinogradov argues, the report does not provide information on the necessary practical measures that could prevent the impending catastrophe, other than the suggestion to merely unite together. Let's answer that suggestion. Practical measures capable of preventing the impending catastrophe have been voiced multiple times by volunteers of the movement at previous forums over the years and continue to be discussed on other platforms. However, some viewers, like Yuri Vinogradov, did not want to delve deeply into the information presented, analyze it, and make comparisons. Therefore, in this latest forum, practical steps were not reiterated due to the shortened format of the forum and constant references to previously presented materials. Vinogradov does not stop there. Instead, the gentleman elects to contribute the following. The phrases used by the authors of the report, such as the end of the world in 2036, the rupture of the planet, all volcanoes will erupt simultaneously, the Earth will be flooded with lava flows, just as happened on Mars, our planet will die, this process will take a few minutes, the moon will fall to Earth, all satellites will fall to Earth, etc., are unreliable because the geological processes occurring on planet Earth are very inertial, have periods of tens to hundreds of millions of years, and cannot be interpolated over such a negligibly small period as 1 to 2 decades. To this, we simply respond as follows. The forecast of catastrophic events that may occur in the future was made based on a comprehensive model that includes a detailed analysis of the events that occurred on Mars. Therefore, the accuracy or inaccuracy of this forecast will ultimately be revealed over time. The scientific theory that geological processes are very inertial is based on the principle of actualism. However, many authors agree that there are periods in Earth's geological history when processes unfolded catastrophically over very short timescales, which is generally referred to in science as the theory of catastrophism. Within the framework of this theory, the statements made by the participants of the forum are fully justified. Furthermore, in the communiqué of 2010, and the first report of GeoChange, Global Environmental Changes, A Threat to Civilization Development, edited by Victor Hahn and Elchin Halilov, and signed by over 300 leading scientists from 85 countries, it is stated on page 8, natural cataclysms can lead to catastrophic consequences for entire regions of our planet in a short time, take the lives of many people, leave the population of large territories without shelter and means of subsistence, destroy the economies of entire states, and cause widespread epidemics and severe infectious diseases. Currently, the global community is not prepared for such a possible development of the situation. Meanwhile, significant increases in endogenous activity have been repeatedly observed in the geological life of our planet, and many geological indicators suggest that another such period has already begun. Quite suddenly, Vinogradov states in the document, I also inform you that the online edition of Arguments and Facts published the opinion of some Russian scientist, specialist in this field of knowledge, on this report on the outlet's website. What can I say to that? The opinions presented in the article at the link pertain only to the materials of what is represented as my own video, that is to say, Egon Cholakian's video, and not to the entire forum. Furthermore, the statements presented represent only the personal opinions of a few individuals, based on a superficial analysis of just one of my presentations. Comparing scientific opinions without factual basis in court is legally incorrect. Science embodies a pluralism of opinions, and therefore using only one opinion literally contradicts the very essence of science. However, there are equally qualified specialists in climate, geology, geophysics, and geodynamics who share the viewpoint presented at the forum. In this regard, the most distinguished scientist in the fields of atmospheric physics, meteorology, climatology, the most distinguished honorable member of the Geographic Society of Uzbekistan, Doctor of Geographical Sciences, Professor Mikhail Lovich Arushanov, quotes, "Our planet has entered a period of global climate change. Observational data indicate an increase in the number and strength of earthquakes, the frequency and intensity of hurricanes and tornadoes, floods and fires, the emergence of numerous cracks and sinkholes in new continental faults, etc. However, to represent that all of these catastrophic processes are due to human activities is not just an error, but a crime." Also, Doctor of Geological and Mineralogical Sciences, Senior Researcher at the Institute of Geology, Seismic Resistant Construction, and Seismology of the National Academy of Sciences of Tajikistan, Head of the Paleontology and Stratigraphy Laboratory, Osmanova Narima Kojen Nabna. And I quote, "Abrupt changes in a number of natural processes have been recorded since the end of the last century. The drift speed of the North Magnetic Pole, which increased by more than 500% from 1980 to 2010, means the beginning of a significant increase in the geodynamic activity of the Earth. The sharp increase in the number of strong earthquakes and the number of deaths during strong earthquakes, according to the exponential law, abrupt change in solar radiation in 1998, abrupt anomalous increase in global tropospheric temperature in 1998, a jump in annual tsunami numbers since 1998, described by exponential trends, the sharp increase in the number of tornadoes, North Atlantic tropical storms, and the total number of hurricanes in the Atlantic basin, steady increase in the number of floods, the sudden increase in the number of forest fires in 1998, and the number of other events. It should be noted that the intensity of the processes tends to increase over time. And the president of the National Academy of Sciences of Kyrgyzstan since 2022, director of the Institute of Seismology of the National Academy of Sciences of the Kyrgyz Republic, corresponding member of the National Academy of Sciences of the Kyrgyz Republic, and honored figure in science of the Kyrgyz Republic 2024, holding a Doctor of Geological and Mineralogical Sciences 1996, Professor Kenepbek Madov. Again, I quote, "If we look at the statistics of Kyrgyzstan over the past 10 years, the number of earthquakes has increased by 3 to 4 times. The annual number of such events in the Republic has increased tenfold. Previously, there were 25 to 30 cases of tectonic movement in the 12 months, but now there are 200 to 300. The first reason for this growth is scientific. The number of seismic stations has increased, and the clarity of the data has improved accordingly. The second reason is that the number of earthquakes has indeed increased. Moreover, this is a global trend, not just characteristic of our republic. What could this be related to? In the context of our country, it may be about preparing for a strong earthquake. But this is just a hypothesis. There is no exact answer to this question yet. However, we are puzzled by the constantly increasing frequency of underground tremors. And the final point in Vinogradov's review reads as follows. Overall, this report cannot be considered scientific and should be recognized as provocative. And in turn, our concluding response is as follows. The review presented by Yuri Vinogradov cannot be regarded as a scientific document, as it contains no references to the source material, is replete with subjective judgments, and presents a distorted interpretation of facts. Given all of the above, and in light of Vinogradov's glaring incompetence, it can be stated with confidence that those who spoke at the forum are by far more honest and intellectually endowed than this director of the Russian Research Center. His own words and actions reveal that he lacks both the moral and scientific standing to call himself a scholar. Unlike the forum speakers, he distorts facts, spreads falsehoods, and did not even take the time to study the materials he purports to critique. This is not merely a lack of professionalism. It is evidence that he is abusing his official position to manipulate public perception and disseminate disinformation. All signs point to a typical careerist, someone who has nothing to do with genuine science. Therefore, I state firmly that he is unworthy not only of leading a research center within the Russian Academy of Sciences, but of bearing the title of scientist at all. Mr. Vinogradov, congratulations. You've succeeded after all. You've managed to prove a lack of scientific merit, that is your own merit. Now the entire world can see exactly what the director of the research center within the Russian Academy of Science is capable of. Not science, but ignorance unworthy of serious consideration. As many have already realized, you cannot be called a scientist, and your so-called review, well, it simply belongs in the trash. Well, everybody, you've just heard a detailed breakdown of each point in the so-called review. And you know what astonishes me most? The fact that Vinogradov, its author, a man who calls himself a scientist and serves as the head of a research center, wrote a text so riddled with blatant illiteracy and errors that it collapses under the slightest scientific scrutiny. But what's even more alarming is this. Russian courts are actually treating it as credible evidence. To the people of Russia, please hear me. If individuals like Vinogradov represent your scientific elite, then one must ask the obvious question, what hope is there in such a system? Who can you count on? This is no longer merely an embarrassment or a regrettable oversight. It is in fact a real threat to the country and to all of humanity, because the lives of millions depend on such experts. How did someone like Vinogradov ever come to lead a major scientific institution in Russia? Brazen, talentless, and utterly without principle. That is who he truly is. And let's be clear, this is not a case of someone simply making a mistake or misunderstanding the data. The research center he heads is responsible for monitoring seismic activity. He cannot know about the anomalies now occurring across Russian territory. If Vinogradov were a real scientist, as I'm suggesting, he would have been the first to sound the alarm about the magmatic threat in Russia. The very danger I'm warning you about today. It should not have come from me, but him, with his official position and access to privileged data, who stood up and issued a public warning. He should have proposed concrete measures, and by now we could have seen the beginning of degassing efforts aimed at saving you, the people of Russia. Instead, he remains silent. And for that cowardly and criminal silence, it is you who will ultimately pay the price, along with your children. Just imagine this. He looks you directly in the eye, shamelessly lies to your face, misleads you, and for this, he receives a salary and an academic honor. All the while, you and your children are under a mortal threat, one he knows perfectly well exists. The signs of activity from the Siberian plume are undeniable, and it is this fraud, Vinogradov, who heads the very agency that should have been the first to inform you, the people of Russia, of the danger. Mr. Vinogradov, tell me, are you not ashamed of yourself? And if you wish, Doctor of Technical Sciences, go ahead and sue me. But listen closely. In that courtroom, I trust we'd fully understand each other. Anyway, let's continue. And so, using just one example, the so-called review, I have shown you, people of Russia, how your courts operate. They call upon experts who have no regard for human life or the law, experts who serve the interest of the shadow government. I know it's no revelation to you that your laws have ceased to function. And if this were merely an internal matter, I wouldn't even attempt to reach you. But today, because of their lust for power and their obsession with protecting personal profits, it's not just you who will perish, it's all of us. For heaven's sakes, look at what they do to those who try to bring you the truth, Russians. Certain power circles are so terrified of the truth spoken by ALLATRA volunteers that out of sheer desperation, they've resorted to branding us as a cult. Imagine that, labeling a scientific community and the volunteers who support it freely and without compensation as cultist. How far must one fall to resort to such cowardly tactics, silencing people through slander, launching full-scale witch hunts against those who speak out? The tactic of branding groups as cults in Russia did not arise spontaneously. It has been carefully honed over decades by Alexander Dworkin, the chief ideologue of the so-called anti-cult movement, and a key figure within Russia's shadow power structure. Virtually every organization he has prosecuted over the years has consisted of ordinary people, free individuals, each with their own beliefs, living law-abiding lives, harming no one. But Dworkin turned them into targets. As he himself wrote in one of his books, quote, "Cults are created to take over the world," end quote. The bitter irony is this: the only totalitarian cult truly striving for power is his own, and it destroys any form of dissent in its path. If one were to examine Dworkin's actions using his own textbooks on cult studies, it would quickly become evident that he has created an extremist cult, one that operates outside the bounds of the law. He established this totalitarian structure as far back as 1993. And now it doesn't merely exist. It has become an active organ of Russia's shadow government, a hidden network that, like an octopus, is tightening its grip on the country from within. They shape state policy and manipulate public opinion under the pretense of protecting you from so-called cults. But in reality, this is nothing more than a smokescreen used to persecute anyone who stands in their way. The shadow government applies this tactic systematically and strategically against all those who pose a threat to its grip on power. And now, most aggressively, against ALLATRA volunteers. Why? Because they fear that we have spoken out publicly about the Siberian plume and about what can still be done to prevent a planetary-scale catastrophe. Their fear of ALLATRA speaking the truth about natural disasters has grown so intense that they are now making blatantly absurd decisions. According to documents that have come into my possession in Russia today, any information related to global climate threats is being linked exclusively to a single organization, that is to say, ALLATRA International public movement. Moreover, based on their courtroom reviews and so-called expert assessments, anyone who disseminates information about global climate issues is automatically deemed a participant of ALLATRA. To grasp the full absurdity of this, by their logic, whether it's the president of any nation, a UN representative, or even an ordinary citizen, if they speak on the topic of natural disasters or raise concerns about global climate challenges, they are subsequently deemed apparently ALLATRA volunteers. This is utter madness. Such a decision could only have been made under the directive of a mentally unwell individual with a documented diagnosis who founded a terrorist totalitarian cult within your country, Russians. And that man's name is the infamous Dvorkin. Let me be absolutely clear. It wasn't I who claimed he is mentally ill. It was his own attending physicians. They explicitly warned that under no circumstances should he occupy any leadership positions, and that his condition is incurable. What you are experiencing in Russia today is a direct consequence of someone ignoring the warnings of his doctors. And just look at how his influence has spread. In Russia, Dvorkin has nearly achieved his goal, control over the country. And most likely he dreams of global domination like the true leader of the totalitarian cult. Even many within your president's inner circle appear to be under his sway. Russia has no external enemies that pose a greater threat than this. The most dangerous enemy is within, and he is dismantling everything from the inside. And now I would like to once again address the President of Russia, Mr. Vladimir Putin. Mr. Putin, please take a close look at the people working under your command, those who surround you. If individuals like Vinogradov, so-called scientists, are the ones supplying you with information about what is happening in the country, with illiterate, misleading reports, then do not be surprised at the challenges you are facing. This is no coincidence. Because of such experts, the real picture is being concealed even from you. And those who attempt to reveal the truth are subjected to ruthless persecution. Why do you allow this to continue? These people do not serve you. They serve the shadow government of which Dvorkin's totalitarian cult is an integral part. That structure has long been undermining your authority, overriding your orders with its own internal directives. The courts, the FSB, the prosecutors, they have become mere puppets, blindly executing the will of this hidden force. Behind your back, phone calls are being made from within your own administration, issuing unlawful orders to persecute people based on fabricated expert assessments, and to violate the very Constitution you are sworn to uphold. Mr. Putin, please tell me, do you not fully comprehend how Dvorkin, a man who once appeared to be nothing more than a minor clerk, has managed to manipulate you so thoroughly that you have unknowingly become a pawn in his game? Remember, when you spoke of democracy, when you even defended Jehovah's Witnesses, Dvorkin was traveling across the country, shaping public opinion and branding them a cult. Later, when you met with citizens during your visits, the same planted individuals, operatives of the shadow power, fed you horror stories about so-called cultists. And then you declared that the state must fight totalitarian cults. You believed you were standing up for your people, fulfilling their duty as president. But in doing so, you opened the door for Dvorkin to seize real influence. Now it is he who decides which organizations in your country are labeled extremist and which are not. My friend, you have become a spectator in a carefully staged performance where Dvorkin has constructed an artificial facade of threats, just like the Potemkin villages of old. And believing this illusion, you handed him the levers of control. This clerk, the head of Raciers, has built a cult that has already stripped you of much of your power. And perhaps, and I do say perhaps, without even realizing it, you too have become his cult's follower. Because if you allow your constitution to be trampled upon, if you permit your own people to be destroyed, then what separates this from 1937, when Stalin gave Yeshov the green light to begin the purges? Only now, instead of Yeshov, you have Guru Dvorkin, who has founded a cult within a totalitarian extremist and terrorist ideology, one that already includes not only members of your inner circle, but vast swaths of your own institutions, the Prosecutor General's Office, of the Ministry of Justice, the FSB, and many others, including the courts. Your church has been turned into a Gestapo, with Dvorkin as its Führer. So I ask you, are you part of this force? Don't answer me now. I already know the truth. Answer your people instead, the people who elected you as the guarantor of their constitutional rights. And now, with your esteemed permission, Mr. Putin, I would like to address those who elected you, the people of Russia. To the citizens you were sworn to protect. Russians, the threat of a Siberian plume eruption is genuine and real, and it concerns every one of you. Please, I urge you, use your common sense. I understand how difficult it is to resist Dvorkin's expertly crafted propaganda. Propaganda built on the methods of Potemkin, Trotsky, Yezhov, Kirnlet, and Smirnov, and other manipulators, madmen, and sadists. But this is about your lives and the lives of your children. You must reclaim your reason and look truth right in the eye. Understand this. If the Siberian plume erupts, it will not be just you who perish. The entire world will feel the consequences, and we too will not have long to live. You have a choice. Continue placing your trust in liars and Dvorkin cultists, people like Vinogradov, or awaken your critical thinking. I urge only one thing of you. Calmly and thoughtfully examine what I am saying. Check every word. Everything I've stated is verifiable. This information is available to you, and you can verify it because this concerns your lives above all. Do not rely on science as it exists today or hope that someone from outside will come to save you. If catastrophe strikes, there will be no time. No one will reach you in time. Take responsibility for your future and the future of your children into your own hands if those things truly matter to you. Reclaim your humanity. Reclaim your basic right, the very right to live. Life is genuinely worth fighting for.